The first flash was so faint that most telescopes never even noticed it, just a ghostly streak cutting across the deep black canvas of space. But in those first 10 seconds, something felt wrong. Too fast, too clean, too deliberate. Astronomers watching the sky that night described the moment the object, now known as Three-Eye Atlas, appeared as if reality itself had hiccuped. One instant, the sky was empty. The next, a needle-thin trail shimmered like a cosmic whisper, slicing through a region of the heavens that should have been absolutely still. In the control rooms of observatories around the world, red lights began to blink. Software started sending automated alerts, then overrides, then escalations usually reserved for near-Earth hazards or military-grade anomalies. This wasn't a meteor. It wasn't a stray fragment of space junk, and it definitely wasn't behaving like any comet ever recorded. Even the object's very brightness kept fluctuating in a way that felt too patterned, almost pulsed, like something alive reflecting sunlight in intervals. Within 30 seconds, a question began spreading across radio channels and encrypted research networks. What exactly had just entered our solar system? As the first data packets arrived, the numbers only deepened the mystery. The object measured roughly 160 meters across, far smaller than most comets tracked by survey systems like Pan-STARRS or Catalina. Yet it reflected light with a sharpness that suggested a surface far smoother than typical icy bodies, almost metallic in nature. Its velocity was even more startling, 93 kilometers per second, nearly double the speed of most long-period comets inbound from the Oort cloud. If it were a natural object, it shouldn't have been moving like this. Not here. Not now. But the most unsettling detail? The angle of approach. Three-Eye Atlas entered the solar system on a hyperbolic trajectory, meaning it wasn't gravitationally bound to the sun. It hadn't come from somewhere within our cosmic neighborhood. It had slipped in from interstellar space, and that instantly placed it in a category with only two other known visitors, Oumuamua in 2017 and 2I Borisov in 2019. Except this one was stranger. The object's tail, or what it should have been its tail, never behaved correctly. Early spectrograph readings showed no significant outgassing, no water vapor, no carbon compounds, not even dust shedding. It looked like a comet, it moved like something artificial, and for a moment, scientists were forced to ask a question they usually bury under calculations, equations, and peer-reviewed caution. What if this wasn't a comet at all? The days that followed were a storm of confusion. Space agencies rushed to aim every working telescope toward the intruder. The James Webb Space Telescope, despite being overscheduled by a year, received an emergency observational slot. And when the first infrared images came through, astronomers stared at the screen in stunned silence. Instead of a rotating, uneven nucleus, common among icy bodies, Three-Eye Atlas revealed a strange repeating glint, a spike in reflection that appeared every 7.14 hours, precisely aligned with its rotation period. A natural object should wobble. This one turned with eerie stability, like a crafted object balancing perfectly around its axis. Some researchers whispered the unthinkable: specular reflection, a mirror-like surface, a panel, a shell, something engineered. Others pushed back. They argued that exotic minerals could explain the reflections, or that an unusually smooth chunk of interstellar ice might mimic an artificial signature. But the data kept contradicting them. If it was ice, where was the sublimation? If it was rock, why was it so glossy? If it was metal, how did nature polish it so precisely? As Three-Eye Atlas drifted deeper into the solar system, it began interacting with sunlight in ways scientists had never seen before. Instead of accelerating slightly as Oumuamua had done, possibly due to faint outgassing, this object's course corrected itself. Not dramatically, not enough to call it propulsion, but enough that orbital models had to be recalculated every few hours. Its trajectory shifted by micrometers per second, tiny, almost negligible, but perfectly smooth. Too smooth, as if responding to the solar wind with intentional stability. Rumors leaked, forums exploded. A classified memo circulated online claiming that an unusual radio signature had been detected near the object. Just a small spike, buried in noise, barely stronger than background cosmic radiation. Official agencies denied it, but once the idea escaped, it could not be contained. Then came the thermal anomaly. JWST detected that one side of the object was warmer than expected, not drastically, just a few degrees Kelvin above what solar exposure alone would dictate. But warming requires energy, and with no vents, no gases, no chemical reactions, nothing made sense. The debate fractured. One faction insisted this was simply a rare kind of interstellar fragment. Another whispered about ancient probes, von Neumann machines, dormant artifacts drifting between stars for millions of years. The possibility was intoxicating and terrifying. If 3I Atlas were natural, it would rewrite our understanding of comet formation beyond our system. If it were artificial, it would mean someone had built it somewhere out there in the unimaginable dark between stars, and whatever built it had let it drift, or had sent it directly into the path of our sun. As the world watched, the object continued its silent glide inward. Telescopes locked onto it. Researchers fought over data access. Agencies issued careful, measured statements that only fueled more speculation. Was it an alien relic? A cosmic shard? A wandering machine? No answer satisfied anyone, because every answer felt too small for the mystery unfolding. And yet, the universe wasn't done surprising us, because just as astronomers finally stabilized their orbital models and agreed on a projected path, 3I Atlas did something unexpected, something that forced every scientist on Earth to rethink their assumptions. The object tilted, slightly, subtly, impossibly, just enough to catch the sunlight differently, and for a moment, a shimmer rippled across its surface, like a signal. Not random, not chaotic, a pattern, a cosmic pulse glinting across the void. A message, maybe. A coincidence? Possibly. A warning, or perhaps an invitation. Whatever it was, humanity had never seen anything like it before. And as 3I Atlas swept inward, closer to the sun, closer to us, the mystery only deepened, pulling us into a story far larger than we ever imagined, a story that had only just begun. For a full day, that faint shimmer haunted every observatory feed on Earth. Scientists replayed the footage again and again, slowing it frame by frame. The reflections spread across the surface of 3I Atlas, not like sunlight hitting a tumbling rock, but like something moving under a shell, something shifting internally, then fading before anyone could understand it. It lasted less than 3 seconds, but in those 3 seconds, the world changed. In the early hours of the morning, Dr. Lena Moroz, a specialist in interstellar bodies at the European Southern Observatory, leaned back in her chair and whispered the words no one wanted to say aloud. It's not behaving like an inert object. Her team exchanged looks, then stared at the readings scrolling across their screens. The thermal pattern had shifted again, now displaying a gradient that followed no natural heating model. The object's sun-facing side warmed as expected, but the opposite side, shielded in shadow, showed intermittent spikes of heat, tiny fluctuations that looked almost rhythmic. Internal processes, someone murmured. Nobody answered, but everyone felt the same chill. Meanwhile, orbital analysts at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory were running new simulations. They fed the updated trajectory into their models, but every scenario led to the same unsettling conclusion. 3I Atlas wasn't simply passing through, it was adjusting. Its path ticked slightly closer to Earth's orbital plane every 2 hours, as if fine-tuning itself. The change was microscopic, never enough to trigger a public warning, but undeniable. Natural objects don't fine-tune, they don't correct, they don't drift with this eerie sense of purpose. And yet, confirmation still eluded them. Even the slightest suggestion that the object might be artificial risked public panic, scientific ridicule, or both. Official statements, predictably, labeled the anomaly as a unique but naturally occurring interstellar comet-like object. But behind closed doors, the conversations grew more frantic. One agency received a fragment of radio noise they couldn't explain. Another reported a faint electromagnetic oscillation that didn't repeat but wasn't random either. And at the Square Kilometre Array in South Africa, one researcher claimed to detect a nanosecond-scale dip in background hydrogen line emissions, something that could only happen if an object passed between the sensors and a distant radio source, but at the wrong angle and at the wrong moment. It was almost like the object absorbed certain frequencies, then released them. A solid rock, especially one from interstellar space, should not do that. Across the internet, speculation spread like wildfire. Some believed 3I Atlas was an ancient probe, drifting for millions of years until gravity nudged it into our path. Others argued it might be a fractured piece of megastructure, debris from a civilization long extinct. A few whispered about Dyson fragments, stasis capsules, or objects meant to seed life across galaxies. But the most unsettling theory came from Dr. Kale Fujimoto, a physicist known for challenging conventional astrophysics. He suggested the object might be a failsafe, a device designed to activate when entering the gravitational well of a star system. Something dormant, waiting, triggered by sunlight after eons of silence. And maybe, he said, that ripple of reflected light wasn't a malfunction, maybe it was the beginning of its awakening. For days, astronomers tracked the object's approach with growing tension. It was now roughly 30 million kilometers from the sun, entering a zone where solar radiation pressure becomes strong enough to push small bodies off their predicted paths. But instead of drifting outward from the radiation, 3I Atlas compensated. It angled itself ever so slightly, like a sail adjusting against solar wind. A comet cannot do that, but a structure, something with panels, surfaces, or mechanisms, might. Still, nothing was conclusive. Every anomaly had a natural explanation if one were willing to stretch the limits of creativity. Maybe it was coated in exotic minerals. Maybe its thermal gradients were caused by microfractures. Maybe the reflection was a cosmic coincidence. Science thrives on skepticism. It must. Without it, imagination overwhelms truth. But imagination wasn't the problem. The problem was the object itself, and the way it seemed to respond to its environment like something aware of it. At the Arecibo Observatory, still partially restored after its earlier collapse, engineers pointed a powerful radar beam at the object. The signal bounced back with surprising clarity, and buried within the returning echo was a strange interference pattern. Not noise, not static, something repeating at intervals too regular to ignore. The technician monitoring the equipment frowned, tapped the screen, and whispered, "Why does it look like it's starting to scan us?" Then suddenly, the pattern stopped. No fade out, no distortion, just silence, as if the object had noticed what they were doing and simply stopped responding. Reports like this kept coming, a glint seen exactly when a telescope locked on it, a thermal spike the moment radar touched it, a course correction immediately after a new observational window opened. Coincidence? Possibly. Pattern? Likely. Intention? No one dared say it aloud. And then came the most shocking event yet, one that sent every agency around the world scrambling. As 3I Atlas crossed within 0.2 AU from the sun, a bright flare erupted across its surface. Telescopes captured it instantly, a sharp burst of light, far too luminous to be simple reflection. For a fraction of a second, the object's shape appeared outlined in the blinding glow. And what they saw didn't match any known comet. The surface looked faceted, smooth angles, geometric contours, edges impossibly straight. Light didn't scatter, it refracted, like glass, or something crystalline, something engineered with precision impossible to attribute to random cosmic formation. The flare faded quickly, swallowed by sunlight, but the impression remained burned into digital memory and human consciousness. 3I Atlas wasn't a rock, it wasn't a comet, it wasn't even close. Something was hidden beneath its outer layer, something angular, structured, deliberate. And now, as it moved ever closer to the sun, it was starting to reveal itself, piece by enigmatic piece. The world held its breath. Because whatever 3I Atlas truly was, whatever secret it carried across the abyss between stars, it was waking up. And humanity was about to witness what came next. In the hours following that blinding flare, the world's scientific community lurched into a state somewhere between exhilaration and dread. Data streamed in from every major observatory, optical, infrared, ultraviolet, radio, and every data set told the same impossible story. The flare that illuminated the surface of 3I Atlas wasn't caused by outgassing, or by impact, or by tumbling ice crystals. It was too brief, too focused, and far too intense. It behaved like a controlled burst of energy, like a deliberate release triggered by internal mechanisms responding to rising solar radiation. And as the flare faded, something else emerged. The outer surface of the object began to fracture. Not catastrophically, not like a comet crumbling under solar heat, but in clean, deliberate lines. Thin cracks forming in perfect geometric patterns, running parallel across the object's surface as if the shell were made of interlocking plates. Some pieces shifted almost imperceptibly, revealing darker, denser material beneath. It didn't peel or crumble, it unfolded. Astronomers watched these changes in real time, their screens updating frame by frame. No one spoke. No one dared to. It was like seeing an ancient sarcophagus stirring after millions of years sealed in darkness. But the most alarming development came from the thermal readings. The interior heat signature was rising, not chaotically, not like melting ice or chemical reaction. It climbed smoothly with the precision of a machine powering up. A comet doesn't warm from the inside out. A rock doesn't activate. But a device might. At NASA, Dr. Ilana Reyes stared at the telemetry with a tightness in her chest. Her team had spent the previous week arguing, recalculating, and arguing again. They ran every natural model available: fragmentation, crystalline ice behavior, solar fracturing, radiative expansion, but nothing predicted the fractal-like cracks they were now seeing. Nothing explained the rotational stability, the course corrections, or the synchronized heat pulses. And nothing, absolutely nothing, explained what happened next. As 3I Atlas descended deeper into the inner solar system, it rotated slightly, aligning itself so that its cracked surface faced the sun. At first, this seemed like coincidence. Thermal alignment happens naturally with some tumbling bodies. But the rotation was too precise, too measured. A perfect 7-degree tilt completed in under 20 minutes. Instruments caught the exact moment the object locked into place. Solar radiation struck its surface, and instead of reflecting or heating evenly, it channeled along the cracks. The cracks glowed, not faintly, not softly. They ignited. A latticework of golden light traced itself across the object as if wiring embedded within its shell had awakened. The glow pulsed, first slow, then steady, like a heartbeat returning after centuries of silence. The frequency of the pulses was measured at 18.3 hertz. Biological? Technological? Some blend of both? No one knew. At the square-kilometer array, radio receivers went wild. A faint signal, previously dismissed as noise, now repeated in perfect synchronization with the glowing pulses. It was barely above the cosmic background, almost impossible to isolate. But once locked onto, it revealed itself as a low, rumbling hum, spanning multiple frequencies, rising and falling in a pattern that suggested structure. Some thought it was an energy distribution function. Others thought it was communication. A few dared to hope it was a message. But the object did not respond to hails. It did not emit anything resembling language. It simply pulsed, steady, controlled, accelerating ever so slightly with each rotation. Meanwhile, in a dim control room in Japan, astrophysicist Dr. Hiroshi Takata examined the spectral data and whispered something that chilled his team. He said, "This isn't activation, it's adaptation." The more solar energy it absorbed, the more stable the pulses became. It was as though 3I Atlas were calibrating itself to the sun's intensity, adjusting, compensating, learning. The implications were staggering. If it was a machine, it was ancient, its shell weathered by countless micrometeorites and radiation scars. If it was biological, it was unlike anything imagined. If it was both, some hybrid of engineered and organic matter, the universe had just grown far more complicated than humanity ever understood. And then, just as scientists were beginning to grasp the scale of what was unfolding, something else emerged. The pulsing stopped. Every instrument watching the object registered a sudden, complete cessation. The cracks darkened, the hum vanished. The object went silent, dead, inert. For 7 full minutes, the solar system held its breath. And then, without warning, the object expelled a burst of material, not gas, not dust, something far stranger, a stream of microscopic particles, each no more than a few microns wide, yet moving with incredible precision. They fanned out behind the object in a perfect spiral shape, like seeds cast into the solar wind. The pattern was unmistakable, too ordered to be natural, too structured to be accidental. Whatever 3I Atlas was doing, it was intentional. Some scientists believed the particles were data. Some thought they were probes. Some feared they were something else entirely. Because when analyzed, the particles showed no organic signatures, no volatile compounds, no known metals. they were hollow. Hollow and symmetrical. Hollow, symmetrical, and uniform, every single one identical down to the atomic level. Like a swarm. Like something preparing the way. On Earth, theories spiraled wildly. Was 3I Atlas seeding the solar system? Was it mapping space at a microscopic scale? Was it preparing for something larger to arrive? Unknown. But one thing was certain. Its behavior was escalating. Its shell was changing. Its trajectory was tightening. And the deeper it moved into the sun's grasp, the more obvious it became. This was no comet. This was no accident. This was an arrival. And whatever intelligence built it, whatever reason it had for coming here, was only beginning to reveal itself. For nearly an hour after the particle stream dispersed into the emptiness, 3I Atlas drifted forward in utter silence, as though exhausted by the effort. The dense inner solar wind scattered the particles, sending them swirling in smooth arcs, but their formation did not break. Even as they scattered, their positions remained mathematically precise, their spacing constant to within fractions of a millimeter. The pattern curved outward like a blooming spiral galaxy in miniature, each particle a tiny point of purpose, each motion synchronized as though guided by an unseen conductor. And then the impossible happened. The particles began to glow, not brightly, but with the faintest phosphorescence, a ghostly blue sheen that flickered intermittently. Solar radiation could not account for it. Electromagnetic excitation did not match the frequency. Every known source of luminescence failed to explain the phenomenon. Yet, there they were, millions of microscopic specks pulsing ever so faintly, responding somehow to the presence of 3I Atlas as it moved ahead of them. It was as if the object had created a swarm, or activated one. At the Max Planck Institute for Radio Astronomy, analysts stared at the incoming readings. The particles displayed a weak but consistent electromagnetic signature, each one behaving like a tiny antenna, resonating at a frequency that matched, astonishingly, the earlier hum coming from 3I Atlas before it went silent. "It's communicating with them," one researcher whispered, or commanding them, or awakening them. But no one had time to explore the implications because a new development was unfolding, something visible without need of instruments, something so undeniable that within minutes, the entire planet was watching it live. 3I Atlas was changing shape. The cracks across its shell grew wider, revealing more of the dark internal structure beneath. Segments of the object's exterior began to swivel, turning like petals adjusting to the sunlight. These movements were painfully slow, almost glacial, but deliberate, too aligned and too synchronized to be any form of thermal expansion. The plates shifted with purpose, rotating around hinges so fine they defied any natural explanation. What emerged beneath the outer casing looked like nothing from any catalog of known cosmic bodies. Smooth surfaces layered with angles that seemed too perfect, too clean. A geometry that was not chaotic, not random, but designed. A symmetry that nature rarely attempts and almost never achieves. Some of the inner surface emitted a soft white glow. Others reflected the sun with a mirror-like sheen. And deep within the newly exposed interior, telescopes caught glimpses of something pulsing slowly. Something like a core beating with deep infrared light every 6 seconds. A living rhythm? A power source? A navigation core waking after eons of travel? No one knew. But the timing of these pulsations matched the spacing of the glowing particles trailing behind it, and matching patterns meant one thing: connection. And then, as observers continued to watch in stunned disbelief, the object performed a maneuver that left even the most skeptical scientists speechless. It adjusted its trajectory again, this time not by micrometers, not by accident, but in a wide and unmistakable arc. A course correction so clean, so intentional, so undeniably controlled that no natural explanation remained standing. 3I Atlas turned. not toward the sun, not toward the outer planets. It turned toward Earth. A shift of 0.12 degrees, small enough not to raise alarms among the general public, but massive enough to send shockwaves through every observatory and space agency. Orbital models recalculated in real time, predictions updated, paths redrawn, and every line converged toward one eventual truth. 3I Atlas would make its closest approach to Earth in 41 days. Still millions of kilometers away, still no threat of collision, but close enough to observe in unprecedented detail, and close enough for whatever intelligence commanded it to see us as well. In a secured briefing room deep within NASA, Dr. Reyes addressed the nervous cluster of scientists. Her voice trembled despite her best efforts. "We must assume this object is responding to our star," she pointed at the latest readings. "We must also assume it's aware of its environment. It may not be targeting Earth, but its trajectory is not random. There is intent here." Someone leaned forward. "Intent from what? A probe? A vessel? A beacon?" Dr. Reyes shook her head. "We don't know, but whatever it is, it's waking up, and we need a plan before it fully does." Plans were discussed, proposals drafted, missions formulated and rejected. Could they send a probe? Too slow. Could they intercept it? Impossible. Could they disrupt its path? Too dangerous. One suggestion, to broadcast a message, was dismissed when analysts noted a chilling detail. Every time humanity attempted to scan the object more aggressively, 3I Atlas reacted. A tilt in orientation, a fluctuation in thermal output, a brief but noticeable pause in its inner pulsation. It was watching us, or at least it was aware of being watched. And as the world argued, analyzed, feared, and hoped, the object continued its slow transformation. Its plates continued to open, the glowing core brightened, and the spiral of particles behind it expanded into a vast, thin, delicate, and precise web, trailing behind like the tail of a cosmic organism. Whatever 3I Atlas was preparing for, it was accelerating. And then one final detail emerged. Quiet, subtle, almost too small to notice. A faint signal, barely a whisper on the electromagnetic spectrum, originating not from 3I Atlas, but from the particles behind it. A signal pointed outward, away from the sun, away from Earth. A signal sent back into the depths of interstellar space, like a beacon, or a report, or a call home. Whatever had arrived was no longer alone, and something out there now knew we were here.
The signal from the particle swarm was so faint at first that most sensors ignored it, lost among cosmic hiss, solar noise, and the constant electromagnetic chatter of the inner solar system. But after 3 hours of analysis, when the background was stripped away and the frequencies were enhanced, a pattern emerged. Not a language, not a modulation, not anything resembling an encoded message. It was a ping. A simple, precise, repeating pulse at intervals of 131 seconds, each burst identical to the last. A cosmic heartbeat sent outward, stretching across millions of kilometers. It was not meant for us. It wasn't even directed toward Earth or the sun. Instead, it pointed toward a region of empty space near the constellation Lyra, an area where no star, planet, or object of interest existed. But that wasn't entirely true. 37 years earlier, astronomers detected a brief, unexplained radio burst from that exact region. Not the famous wow signal, but similar in its strangeness, its isolation, its lack of repetition. It was cataloged, archived, then forgotten. Now, decades later, the particle swarm was sending a pulse toward that same patch of nothing. A chill spread through the scientific community. Something had called out once. Something had called back today, and the timing was too precise to dismiss. While communication specialists tried to decode the meaning, telescopes refocused on 3I Atlas itself. The plates that formed its shell had opened further, exposing a deeper structure beneath.
an intricate array of interlocking components, each shaped like elongated hexagons and arranged in a pattern no comet, asteroid, or natural fragment could ever form. The interior was smooth, seamless, without the jagged chaos expected from a fractured interstellar rock. Even radiation analysis suggested the inner layer absorbed sunlight with near-perfect efficiency, converting energy into something else, something unknown. Its infrared output increased slightly, then stabilized, pulsing now at an interval matching the swarm behind it. Core and particles connected, object and cloud synchronized. It was not one thing, it was a system, and like all systems, it had purpose. Meanwhile, the world watched as 3I Atlas continued its slow turn toward Earth. News channels speculated endlessly, filling screens with amateur theories, shaky animations, and whispered warnings. Millions wondered if it was friendly. Billions feared it was not. On social media, conspiracy theories erupted like wildfire. Alien probes, ancient machine gods, secret governments, doomsday predictions. But none of them came close to the truth unfolding quietly across observatories. Because as 3I Atlas approached the 0.1 AU mark, its motion changed again. Its speed slowed. Not dramatically, not enough to alarm the public, but enough for orbital analysts to see it. Objects falling into the gravitational well of the sun always accelerate. Always. Yet this one slowed by 0.004%, a change so subtle, most charts wouldn't show it. But the analysts saw it. They recalculated trajectories, ran the numbers again and again. If something slows while being pulled inward, it can only be because a force is counteracting gravity, a propulsion mechanism, a braking system, an internal adjustment, or a response. The conclusion, though whispered, was no longer avoidable. 3I Atlas was navigating. And for the first time since its discovery, humanity realized it wasn't simply entering the inner solar system, it was arriving. In a remote observatory in northern Chile, a graduate student reviewing polarized light data noticed something odd, an orientation shift in the object's exposed interior. The hexagonal structures weren't just opening or rotating, they were aligning, facing something, focusing. She ran the polarization filters again. Same result. The object was orienting a portion of its interior toward Earth, not the entire structure, just one segment, like a dish or an eye. By the time her findings reached global channels, it had already happened. A narrow beam of particles, not bright, not glowing, but dense, streamed from inside 3I Atlas and stretched outward toward the particle swarm behind it. The swarm absorbed the beam, brightening slightly, then dispersed the energy across its entire spiral. The whole formation shimmered like a living network. Energy flowed through it. Information passed through it. Something activated. And then, right at the moment the particle network stabilized, the hum returned. Not from the particles, not from deep space, but from 3I Atlas itself. Low, rhythmic, stronger than before. The pulses echoed through radio channels, vibrating across multiple frequencies. They were structured, layered, almost harmonic. And the longer it emitted, the more the hum changed, growing clearer, more organized, more complex. Not language, not random, something between communication and calibration. And then, as the world listened, the frequency shifted again. The pulses slowed, flattened, equalized, until finally, impossibly, they matched a pattern humanity recognized. It was the hydrogen line frequency, 1420 megahertz, the universal standard for interstellar communication. The frequency used by SETI, the frequency humans had been listening to for decades, the frequency chosen by scientists as the best way to speak to other civilizations. 3I Atlas was tuning itself to our language. Not words, not sentences, but our cosmic alphabet. The implication struck like lightning. It wasn't just reacting, it wasn't just observing, it wasn't just awakening, it was preparing. Preparing for contact. and the particles behind it, still glowing, still pulsing, still sending their distant beacon back into the void, seemed to shift into tighter formation, as though bracing for what came next. Humanity, for the first time, realized the truth. The comet was never a comet, the arrival was never accidental, and whatever intelligence built 3i Atlas had finally noticed us. The only question now was, what would it do next? The air in the control room thinned, as if the space itself were holding its breath. Dr. Rivera's voice barely rose above a whisper. It didn't just copy the signal. Her sentence trailed off as the data stream shifted again, subtle at first, almost imperceptible, before resolving into a new pattern, not Voyager's this time, something else, something older, a rhythm no one recognized, pulsing like a heartbeat from across the void. The technicians leaned in, panels flickered. A low hum vibrated through the floor, as though the machinery instinctively understood what the humans could not. Is it responding to us? Someone asked. Dr. Rivera shook her head, not in denial, more in awe. No, it's communicating with something else, something we're not hearing. The signal's cadence quickened, a flare of static, a sudden drop, then another echo, clear, intentional. It wasn't talking to Earth, it was talking through Earth. A relay, a bridge, a message meant for someone or something far beyond the solar system, and humanity had accidentally stepped into the middle of the conversation. A chill swept through the room, subtle but unmistakable, as if the universe itself had shifted its weight. The monitors dimmed for a breath, then sharpened with a clarity that made everyone's pulse quicken. The waveform was no longer chaotic. It had structure, mathematical, elegant, deliberate. Dr. Rivera stepped closer. This pattern, it's layered. She traced the oscillations with trembling fingers, following the rise and fall of the signal as if reading an alien syllable. Voyager's echo is just the carrier. The real message is nested inside it. Nested, hidden in plain sight, wrapped in the memory of a human spacecraft that had drifted alone for decades. Someone swallowed hard. So it knew we'd recognize Voyager's signature. No, Rivera murmured, eyes wide. It knew we'd trust it. The room fell silent. The signal shifted again. 3 pulses, a pause, then 3 more. Not random, not noise. A pattern that tugged at the edges of familiarity, like a word you almost remember from a language you've never spoken. The technicians exchanged uneasy glances. It's repeating, one said. Rivera's voice lowered, as though the signal could hear her. No, it's waiting. The truth settled over them like dust in a sealed tomb. Something out there had reached back. Something that remembered Voyager. Something that understood Earth had finally heard it. And now, it wanted an answer. No one in the control room dared to speak. The silence felt alive, dense, as though the walls themselves were listening. I-3I Atlas anomaly drifted across the screen like a ghostly ember, one speck against a canvas of endless dark, yet carrying the weight of 1,000 questions humanity had never been brave enough to ask. The signal pulsed again. 3 beats, a pause, then a deeper hum, almost organic, then a soft harmonic resonance that vibrated through the floor tiles. It felt less like a transmission, more like a heartbeat. Dr. Rivera inhaled sharply. Increase the spectral resolution to 0.01 angstroms. Her voice cracked under the pressure, but her eyes burned with focus. Lines of hyperspectral data unfurled like a cosmic tapestry. The pattern sharpened, revealing complexity far beyond any comet tail, solar flare reflection, or natural electromagnetic scatter. One of the astrophysicists, a man who had spent 3 decades debunking alien conspiracies, suddenly lost all color in his face. "That's not thermal noise," he whispered. Rivera nodded. "No, it's interference encoding." The words struck the room with the quiet force of a meteor impact. Interference encoding wasn't random, it wasn't accidental, it required intention. layered modulation that Earth's most advanced deep space probes could only barely replicate. Whatever I3I Atlas was, it wasn't just passing through, it was talking. The repeating pulses shifted again, now forming longer, deliberate sequences. Some frequencies rose into the kilohertz range, brushing against harmonics used in biological communication, whale songs, neural firing patterns, and even the rhythm of the human heartbeat. "It's mirroring us," she breathed. "It's learning." A younger technician stepped back as if the monitors themselves were dangerous. "But why? What does it want?" Rivera stared at the screens, her voice quieter than the hum of the machines. "Contact doesn't begin with understanding, it begins with curiosity." Outside the window, the night sky gleamed with indifferent stars. Yet somewhere out there, far beyond Jupiter's orbit, beyond the Kuiper Belt, and the cold dark void where sunlight dies, I3I Atlas drifted with impossible purpose. A shard, a messenger, a memory of something older than Earth's first breath. And now, for the first time, humanity wasn't staring into the abyss alone. The abyss was staring back. A faint tremor rippled through the spectrograph as the signal deepened, stretching into a frequency that brushed the lower edge of human hearing. The lights in the room flickered, not from power loss, but from interference. A presence, a pressure, as though something vast and unseen had momentarily leaned closer to Earth. Dr. Rivera steadied herself against the console. "Run a phase shift analysis," she ordered, though her voice sounded far away, like she was speaking underwater. The computer hesitated before responding, its processors taxed to their limits. Lines of data spilled across the screen, twisting into spirals and geometric loops, shapes that echoed ancient symbols carved into stone temples thousands of years before humanity understood the sky. Someone gasped. "That looks like Fibonacci recursion." More loops appeared, more spirals, more impossible precision. "No," Rivera murmured. "It's beyond Fibonacci. This is recursive geometry adapted to three-body gravitational fields, something we only recently simulated." Another spiral formed, sharper, cleaner, vibrating with a resonance that prickled the back of the neck. It wasn't just data, it was instruction. A new voice, deep, steady, rose from the back of the room. Dr. Henrik Zhao, the team's most cautious theoretician, approached the screen as if approaching an altar. "It's mapping something," he said quietly. "Mapping us." Rivera turned toward him. "You mean our orbit?" "No," Zhao shook his head. "Our trajectory, our history, our timing. Whoever, whatever sent this understands exactly where we should be in the moment we received it." The realization landed hard. The 3I Atlas object wasn't improvising, it wasn't broadcasting blindly into the void. It knew Earth's motion, it knew the speed of light delay, it knew when we would be listening. And now, the signal changed once more. The heartbeat-like pulses softened, replaced by a slow rising tone, low at first, then building into a crisp harmonic staircase. Each rung was an exact multiple of the last, a perfect mathematical ladder climbing through the electromagnetic spectrum. Zhao's eyes widened. "It's constructing a bridge." "A bridge to what?" someone asked. Before Rivera could answer, the tone peaked, and suddenly an image appeared on the auxiliary monitor. Grainy at first, flickering, warped, but unmistakably intentional. A shape, not a face, not a ship, something older, something elemental. A rotating lattice of icy fragments spiraling around a core that glowed faintly in infrared, glowed like trapped heat, impossible heat for an object supposedly born from frozen interstellar darkness. A soft exhale escaped Rivera. "That's 3I Atlas," she whispered. "It's showing us itself." But as the image sharpened, another realization struck them at once. The lattice wasn't random. The spiral wasn't natural. The structure looked engineered. The entire control room leaned closer, drawn in by a force none of them could name. Because if a comet could have a skeleton, if an interstellar fragment could have architecture, then the universe was far stranger than anyone dared imagine. And 3I Atlas was not a visitor. It was a message made of ice, stone, and memory. And it had finally chosen to speak. The room seemed to tilt as the lattice rotated on the screen, each shard reflecting faint, ghost-like glimmers of starlight. It wasn't smooth or symmetrical like human engineering. It was organic and alien, yet unmistakably designed with purpose. Shards arranged in intervals too precise for natural formation, angles repeating with uncanny consistency. Dr. Zhao leaned in so close his breath fogged the corner of the monitor. "These aren't fractures," he whispered. "They're partitions." Rivera felt her throat tighten. Partitions of what? The question hung in the air like a long, dark shadow. The image shifted again, zooming, stabilizing, revealing intricate details. Along the lattice edges were tiny reflective surfaces, no larger than grains of sand, yet positioned in exact geometric ratios. They glittered like frozen mirrors, capturing the faintest hint of starlight. One of the younger analysts finally spoke what everyone was afraid to say out loud. "It looks like sensors. Sensors on an interstellar object, 1,000 kilometers beyond Neptune's orbit, drifting silently toward nothing." The implication struck like cold water. "This isn't a comet," Zhao murmured. "It's a recorder." "A recorder of what?" Rivera asked, her heartbeat quickening. "Of everything." The technicians stared in disbelief, but the signal continued, unbothered by their fear, unconcerned with their theories. Another pulse, another cascade of harmonics. The room's oxygen felt thinner. The display flickered, then revealed a new layer beneath the lattice, faint but visible. A core, not solid ice like a typical long-period comet, but a fractured sphere emitting weak infrared heat, far too warm for an object supposedly frozen for millions of years. A soft exhale escaped Rivera. "Comets don't have internal heat sources. They don't have internal anything," someone added. But this one did. A dim, red glow, beating with slow, methodical regularity, as if responding to its own transmission. Zhao's voice trembled. "That's not geothermal activity. It's regulated, controlled." Rivera's pulse thundered. "You think it's alive?" The room snapped into a deeper silence, not fearful, but reverent, as if they were standing in the presence of something ancient. "No," Zhao said slowly, carefully, choosing each word as if it might trigger a cosmic reaction. The signal suddenly spiked, a harmonic leap, high, sharp, carrying a resonance that felt like it vibrated straight into bone. Lights flickered, monitors buzzed, the entire feed shook as though 3i Atlas had turned its attention directly to them. Then, a frame froze on the screen. Not random, not distorted, deliberate. A frozen lattice fragment rotated into view, and etched along its icy surface was a pattern, tiny, repeating, unmistakable. A circle with a line and a dot. A simplified orbital diagram of Earth. Rivera's heartbeat stuttered. "It's showing us. And in that moment, the impossible truth crystallized. 3i Atlas wasn't just communicating, it had been watching. For longer than anyone realized, across distances no human machine could survive, across epochs humanity had no words for. And now that Earth had finally looked back, it was responding. Not as a comet, not as debris, not as an accident, but as something built with intention, carrying memories older than Earth's oldest breath. A visitor, a messenger, or something far, far stranger. And its story was only beginning to unfold.
For several seconds, no one in the room breathed. The symbol hovered on the monitor like an accusation, quiet and absolute. A circle, a line, a dot. So simple it could be drawn by a child, so universal it transcended language itself, yet carved into the icy skin of an interstellar object that predated everything humans had ever built. "It can't be coincidence," someone whispered. Rivera's voice was barely audible. "Nothing about this is coincidence." The signal pulsed again, 3 slow beats, each one vibrating through the room like the toll of a distant cosmic bell. The flare of harmonics that followed was softer now, almost cautious, as though the object had sensed their shock and was waiting for them to understand. Zhao stepped back from the console, his eyes glassy with the weight of realization. If 3i Atlas has these markings, then it was never drifting at random. It came from somewhere, sent by someone. Or something, Rivera added. The symbol disappeared, replaced by a rotating scan of the lattice,
layers peeling apart like petals of an alien flower, each revealing another geometric structure beneath. Triangles spiraled into hexagons, hexagons fractured into crystalline webs. Everything was arranged according to ratios too precise for natural formation. "Look at the spacing," Rivera whispered. "Each layer is separated by a factor of phi, the golden ratio." A gasp rippled through the room. Phi wasn't just mathematically beautiful, it was everywhere. From galaxies to nautilus shells, from DNA spirals to weather patterns, even human lungs grew in spirals of phi. The universe loved this number. It carved it into everything that lived. But comets? Comets had never been architects. "Run a structural model of the interior," Rivera instructed. The simulation began, slowly at first, then faster, faster, until lines of light converged at the core, forming something unmistakable. A hollow chamber, nearly spherical, perfectly centered. The scientists froze. "That's engineered," Zhao whispered. "It has to be." Rivera's skin prickled with cold. What would need a chamber inside a comet? Silence crept through the room, as heavy as gravity itself. A chamber could store data. A chamber could protect something fragile. A chamber could preserve. The simulation zoomed deeper, revealing small clusters around the chamber walls, minuscule crystalline nodes, each one pulsing faintly with thermal variance. "Those aren't ice pockets. They're modules," someone said. Zhao exhaled shakily. This thing might be a vault. A vault drifting for thousands, maybe millions of years, crossing interstellar distances no human vessel could survive, carrying something someone wanted protected. But the signal wasn't finished. The pulsing harmonics softened again, shifting lower and lower until they hovered at the threshold of human hearing. The room hummed, chairs vibrated, windows trembled, yet the sound carried no violence. It felt more like a resonance, a tuning, a calibration. Rivera realized it first. "It's synchronizing with our instruments." Zhao's head snapped toward her. "Why would it do that?" "To ensure we see what it wants to show us." The last harmonic flickered, then stopped. Every monitor went dark. A moment of pure, suffocating silence. Then slowly, like a sunrise emerging from the edge of a frozen horizon, a new image blossomed onto the main screen. Not data, not a scan, not a mathematical sequence. A sky. A sky filled with stars no human chart had ever mapped. A horizon lined with 3 moons. A blue-white aurora drifting across an alien atmosphere. And beneath it all, a surface of frozen plains stretching farther than imagination. The room erupted in disbelief. Shouts, gasps, frantic scrambling. Yet Rivera stood perfectly still, breath trapped in her lungs. Because she understood. "This," she whispered, "is where 3I Atlas came from." A world, a star system, a memory carried across light years. The object had not only shown them what it was, but where it had begun. And if it could remember its home, then it had not come here by accident. It came with a purpose humanity was only just beginning to understand. No one in the room moved. The alien landscape on the monitor glowed with soft, impossible realism, not a simulation, not an artistic rendering, but something that felt captured, as though 3I Atlas had carried this image across the void like a memory fossilized in ice. The 3 moons hung in the alien sky with unnatural stillness. One was fractured, split by a massive scar that ran across its surface like the wound of a broken world. Another rotated with a shimmering ring of debris orbiting it, reflecting the light of a pale, distant sun. The third was smooth and dark, a shadow moon absorbing more light than it reflected. Zhao's voice trembled. This can't be a coincidence. This is a recording, a visual record." Rivera stepped closer. "It's not just showing us where it came from," she said quietly. "It's showing us what it was meant to remember. The horizon flickered. The frozen plains shifted like a dream caught between layers of consciousness. The aurora rippled unnaturally, bending at angles that shouldn't exist. For a moment, the entire image warped, stretching into geometric distortions, spirals, golden ratios, fractal recursion, before snapping smoothly back into view. "It's encoded in harmonics," Rivera whispered. "Each frequency unlocks a layer of the memory." Zhao leaned forward. "So there might be more?" Before she could respond, the image changed. A slow pan across the landscape revealed colossal structures rising from the ice. Not cities, not machines, but crystalline towers, shaped like spirals of frozen light. Each tower seemed grown, not built, organic, yet symmetrical, ancient, yet impossibly advanced. They're alive," someone breathed. "Or were alive." The crystalline spirals pulsed faintly, as if echoing the cosmic heartbeat of the signal. Then a ripple of distortion moved through the scene, and the sky darkened. Stars vanished one by one, swallowed by a creeping shadow. The three moons flickered like dying embers. Zhao swallowed hard. Something happened to this world. The shadow grew, rolling over the frozen plains, devouring the auroras, swallowing the crystalline towers. A storm, but not of wind, a storm of silence, soundless, lightless, terrifying. The towers dimmed one by one, until only one remained glowing faintly. And then, the image cut out. Darkness reclaimed the screen. The silence in the room now felt suffocating. Rivera pressed her palms slowly against the console, steadying herself. "There's more," she said. "It didn't show us everything." As if responding to her voice, the signal pulsed again, not violently, but softly, like a whisper from the far edges of time. The monitors flickered. A new sequence began. Not visuals, not audio, something more primitive, something more deliberate. A string of numbers, coordinates, distances, timestamps in units no human civilization had ever used. Zhao's eyes widened as he traced the data patterns on the screen. "These aren't just coordinates, they're trajectories." Rivera froze. "Trajectories of what?" Zhao swallowed. "Objects, many of them, dozens." A ripple moved through the control room. The implications hit like a shockwave. 3i Atlas was not alone. It was one of many, one of dozens. And its path, its journey, its arrival, none of it had been accidental. Rivera exhaled, her voice barely above a whisper. "This wasn't the first, and it won't be the last." The signal pulsed again, soft, rhythmic, patient, as if saying, "You finally understand."